Welcome to the Vibrantly You podcast. We're your hosts, Megan Martineau
and Caitlin Cipriano. In this podcast, we talk about fitness and nutrition on your motherhood journey. Whether you are trying to conceive, pregnant, postpartum, or beyond, you are welcome here.
Nothing is off limits, and our goal is to support you in this important season of life so that you can feel vibrantly you. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. Please see the show notes for more details.
Welcome back to the Vibrantly You podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a realistic workout schedule in the first year postpartum. Returning to exercise postpartum is a really hot topic on social media, and it's something that also can create a lot of guilt for mom. I know I have definitely felt like pressure to do more than maybe I was up for, both physically and mentally in the past, in both of my postpartum experiences. I think definitely more pressure in the first pregnancy after I had my son. But I think that, once you and I connected more during that time frame and really like got more into this perinatal space, it eventually like took some of that like pressure and expectation off. So hopefully Megan and I can help, you take some of that pressure off for other moms too. How did you feel, especially like before like you got more into this space with that?
Yeah, so I would say after my first pregnancy, so of course that was a C-section. I have a whole podcast episode on that. If you have not listened to that, that is episode number 9. I was definitely one of those people who I was like, as soon as I get cleared, I'm gonna start working out. I'm gonna be back to my regular workout routine. And I was someone pre-pregnancy where I was working out like 5, 6 times a week, like very, very consistent. Um, yeah, and then was very quickly like, what the fuck? Like this is not happening. And just very surprised too by like how different my body was. I do feel like though, yeah, like I did feel a lot of pressure when I couldn't show up consistently, whether it was from sleepless nights or just like my body not feeling up for it, or, the baby not allowing me to put him down so I could work out or whatever it was, just like dealing with those feelings of like failure or like I'm not doing what I should be doing because although I do feel like, I mean, we both had our sons in 2020. I don't feel like social media was necessarily as like I don't want to say toxic, but I'm going to say toxic, especially when it comes to postpartum and like bounce back. I don't feel like the messages were necessarily as like bad as I tend to see them now. Because this was also like pre TikTok.
Yeah, I feel like it was, at least for me, it was like internal
Yeah.
pressure. I should have maybe like clarified that more. It was not from a social media space, or like it was like the expectation that I had for myself, because very similarly, like I was working out 5 to 6 days a week. At that time, I was with my athletic training background, I was also working part-time at a gym training people and like wanting to like aesthetically like be back to how I was. So it was definitely like personal pressure versus
Yeah.
like any sort of external forces.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think because, yeah, we both came from similar exercise backgrounds where like that was just like woven into our, you know, who we were, and like what we did regularly. So, and I do think that's pretty common for people like who are pretty like avid um exercisers, pre-pregnancy, that there is just like more of this internal expectation of like, okay, I'm going to return back to this. Even if it's like, okay, I know I might not be ready at 6 weeks, I still think sometimes there is that feeling of like, okay, well now I'm 2 months or now I'm 3 months postpartum, like I should be back there and I'm not. And now, though, with the way that social media is, then you do see like other moms that are doing it, and then you're like, well, they're doing it, why can't I do it? Um, and yeah, I do feel like that was tough for me with my first. With my second, I do feel like I also maybe had some pressure because it's my job, you know? So I was like, I do feel like I need to show up and like be doing the things. But I also kind of felt like it was a good teaching moment for me as well to be like, hey, like this is my job, but it doesn't mean I'm coming out of the gate strong at 6 weeks postpartum and doing all the things. Like, I do feel like I've been pretty open about like what my realistic routine has looked like in the last 2 years and just how I kind of have navigated some different obstacles that have come up. Like, I mean, for both you and I, we have dealt with pain. Um, and yeah, just things are going to happen. And
Yeah.
I do think, um, yeah, it can just be really hard, especially in this like digital age that we're in when you like are comparing to what other people are doing.
Yeah, I think I had to really let go of that, especially the second time around. I think I finally was able to like let go of it somewhat in my like first time postpartum, but I don't think I was able to really let go of it until closer to like a year and like kind of getting more into the perinatal space and just like understanding certain both like physiological and mental aspects of how my body had like changed and being able to really like be like, oh, okay, like I should be giving myself a little bit more grace here with everything that's going on, like.
Yeah.
So I think that there's certainly a lot of like personal like ebb and flow and navigating like what is both like realistic for me that I can also be consistent with because I know that's like the most important part.
Yeah, and I would say too, like we know that exercise postpartum is important, right? Like, and I say this with a lot of compassion and love, pre- prefacing that. But I do think it can be easy to be like, well, life is just too crazy. I'm just not going to do anything and wait until I'm feeling in a better place. And I 100% understand that because been there. However, it is better to just start, just do something, especially in that first year to just build up your confidence a little bit, to like start that momentum, to start to gain some consistency and even just support your body because it's been through so much with pregnancy and birth that your body needs that support and it doesn't have to look perfect. So, as a trainer, what I typically recommend for my postpartum clients is starting out with even just like 2 times a week, 3 times a week. I even find sometimes when I'm starting with my clients, a lot of them are returning from pregnancy. So we've also done a lot of work together in pregnancy. And I think that sometimes because of that, and if they were working out 4 to 5 times in pregnancy, they're like, oh yeah, like let's just continue with what we were doing before. And I'm like, let's start out with 2 times a week. We can always build. And I would say the majority of people find that like that does feel the best because things come up, right? Like, especially if you are starting out at, say 2 months postpartum, like your baby sleep is wildly inconsistent. So your sleep is inconsistent. And we want to be so mindful of that, of how much you're sleeping and not like pushing yourself like crazy. Want to be taking into account nutrition, breastfeeding. There's just so many circumstances. So I do think going on the lower end is always a great place to start. Like 2 times, yeah, 2 to 3 times a week, probably two. And doing like short little sessions, like 15 to 30-minute workouts. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, or even just picking like two exercises that you know are going to support your body. Just do those. Like that's such a great place to start. And I feel like is realistic for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. I think also like we were just talking about like pressure and like just knowing like, okay, I'm supporting myself if I'm doing, like you said, these, 2 to 3 exercises. I can, do them and break them up throughout the day, even maybe like, baby's doing tummy time and you're on the floor, like the way that, we have that you have like, shared too previously about how important it is to just like reconnect with like your core and your breath. And it doesn't have to be, you know, this, you're not jumping right back into these like intense workouts and in that initial phase of being postpartum.
Yeah, and I do think in pregnancy, I talk a lot about like, shifting your mindset around like what exercising in pregnancy looks like. Because for a lot of people, it's not going to look like your pre-pregnancy workout routine because again, there's so many things that come up in pregnancy, right? So kind of shifting it more to being like movement and intentional movement. And that mindset definitely carries over postpartum as well. Because even the things you're doing in your daily life, like you're picking up a baby, putting down a baby, you're carrying a car seat, you're carrying a diaper bag, like you're doing all these very active things and like lifting weight, even if it's not a dumbbell. So
Yeah.
being mindful of how you're moving as you're going about those things, that all counts. And just being, yeah, like I said, like mindful about it, intentional and moving in ways that support your body. Um, I think is something that a lot of people honestly like overlook in that first year postpartum and think that they need to be doing like strenuous, intense exercise for it to quote unquote count. And that's very much not true.
Everything counts. Everything adds up to what you're doing. And like you said, you looking to be like, how do you support your body during this time when things are more challenging? You have less sleep and, time available, and just again, starting slow and really building up.
Yes. That is a huge one. Like I said, you can always add things on. But like if you go too strong out of the gate, that's sometimes where people get into trouble because they hurt themselves and their body's not ready for that. So starting out slow and really prioritizing helping your body heal, like you mentioned, reconnecting to your breath and your pelvic floor and your core and just treating yourself like a beginner, like you've never exercised in your life. Even though it can feel kind of defeating or frustrating, it's part of the process and it pays off in such a big way. So just really trying to start slow. I This can kind of be a hot topic, but like I do try to have people focus more on the healing aspect than losing weight. A lot of people, right when they're cleared to work out, they're like laser focused on losing weight. And again, I understand, like your body feels so different. And a lot of times it's the added weight that makes people feel disconnected in their body or like everything is just so different. And so I understand wanting to like focus on that first, but a lot of times we do need to focus first on the healing and strengthening before we can really pay attention to weight loss. And also, nutrition is a big part of weight loss. And if you are lactating and breastfeeding, we have to be so mindful about that. I know we've talked about that quite a bit here on the podcast. Um, but yeah, starting slow is really going to, while frustrating, pay off in a big way.
It does pay off, and you're building a really nice, solid foundation for yourself, and focusing on the healing too from a like nutrition perspective, going along with what you said about weight loss is like if you put that foundation in place, both from your movement and your nutrition, like the weight loss is gonna eventually come. You don't need to like force it and end up causing, yourself to become even more depleted than you already are and deal with injuries or other issues down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to like give some guidance too for people. So if you are, you're like, okay, like where do I start? Like I hear you. I want to get started with something, but I don't know where to start because maybe you are just used to those pre-pregnancy workouts and you're like, I don't know how to start slow. The thing that I would prioritize in that first year postpartum, so I'm not necessarily talking about like once you're cleared to work out, but in that first year, like generally speaking, what should you be focusing on? Definitely lifting weights. I feel like I don't hate yoga. I don't hate Pilates. I think they are fantastic. I do think people should be doing both of those. That should be incorporated into, your routine somewhere. But I don't want you to only be doing that. Like, we need to be lifting weights. This is important for your bone health, for building muscle. And like I mentioned earlier, you're doing a lot of lifting and carrying as a parent. You are carrying car seats, you're lifting children. Your children are just going to keep getting heavier, built-in progressive overload. And as they get older, you're carrying bikes because they decide to ditch their bike halfway through your walk, like
The worst.
and those bikes are not light, let me tell you. So, we really want to be lifting weights. That is going to help you feel your best. And so, for postpartum specifically, I don't necessarily want you like, you know, wasting time doing like bicep curls. I mean, like, yeah, you need strong biceps, but like, let's pay attention to the things that are most impacted by pregnancy. So, focusing on your glute strength, on rebuilding your core, having a strong back, all the things that have been really significantly impacted by pregnancy because remember, we have so many postural shifts that happen during pregnancy. And so we want to try to address those postpartum so that you're not dealing with chronic pain for years to come. So those are like the three main areas where I typically recommend focusing in on. And then also practicing the things that are going to help with your daily activities. So, like I mentioned, if you're carrying and holding children, maybe you're incorporating some carries, like farmer carries, or like racked squats, things like that that are going to kind of mimic what you're doing in your real life. Those are great places to start. And then you can always add on from there.
Yeah, I think those are really great, like places just too when you think about those like functional pieces of everyday living for a parent with young children. Those things are just gonna serve, everyone so well.
Exactly. And then in addition to that, just like focusing on the like functional movements, trying to be consistent. And I feel like that's like a new buzzword is like be consistent. And you're like, okay, like what does that mean? But it's gonna look different for everybody, and basically it just means like, you know, being consistent. I don't know how to say that
I th
differently, but
Yeah, I think that maybe you have even said this before, but it's like um everyone's consistency is gonna look a little bit different, and it's like what you feel like you can commit to on a weekly basis, again, like most of the time. And so, like, for me, like, my goal is three, strength training workouts per week. And so, like, consistency in that means that, like most of the time I'm getting three, but I'm at least doing two. So
hmm.
like even if I do two, that still feels consistent to me. Like I can still see progress when I do two as well.
Yeah, and I think too, sometimes like thinking about the number of weekly workouts can be overwhelming for people. So you can even zoom out further and look at your month as a whole. And even if you're like, each month I'd like to get in 5 workouts. Great. Let's start there. If you're having a really busy month and you have to like front load the month and it's like the first 2 weeks, you're squeezing in those 5 workouts and then you don't do anything the next 2 weeks, like, is it ideal? Not necessarily, but hey, you're still being consistent. You're getting in 5 workouts a month. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be perfect. Like, let's just keep getting that forward momentum and keep making progress. And yeah, like you said, it's something that you can reliably add to your schedule. I like to have people set like our realistic goal and then like our stretch goal. So like in your example, like your realistic goal is twice a week, your like ideal stretch goal 3 times a week. Like that's perfect. And then I also think that helps with like the mindset and confidence piece because you're like, yes, okay, I got in my 2 workouts. I would have loved to get in 3, but I couldn't and I got the 2 and that's still a win. Versus if you were like, I need to work out 3 times this week. Ugh, I only got 2. Why do I suck? Like, why didn't I get
Yeah,
that thing? Like just that little shift can like
totally.
really change your confidence in yourself and like your trust in yourself. So I do always say like go on the lower end. Like I mentioned before, you can always add things and one thing that I hate to see in the postpartum period, and I see this a lot, is people do try to go too hard, too fast. They really overcommit. And it all comes from like a well-intentioned place, right? Like you're excited to get back into working out. Like you really want to just feel better. And some people are like, I'm going to work out every single day this week. And maybe you do that for like the first 2 weeks. I typically find it's like the first 2 weeks is when people's motivation is the highest. And then that third week, something comes up, you only get in 2 workouts. And again, you're mentally being like, "Ugh, I suck. I can't do this. I might as well just not even bother." And so then you completely, quote unquote, fall off the wagon. And then it's like you go weeks without doing anything. And then it's like the cycle repeats. And it's like rather than doing that, let's just say, okay, let's do 2 days a week and stay consistent with that. And then once you have like reliably and consistently done twice a week, you can start to add on another day. And it's just building more of that momentum. And then you're less likely to hurt yourself, if you're going too hard, too fast. And yeah, just less of like that mental overwhelm.
I think also, you know, not relying on the motivation is like
Mhm.
important to talk about here too, because I think a lot of you were talking about those first like 2 weeks of starting an exercise program. And I think people, feel the same way too when they start to make nutritional changes is like they're will say they're really excited, they're really motivated for like the first 2 weeks, and then something comes up, like, a kid gets sick, or, you have plans for the weekend, whatever the case may be. And, you kind of like hit that like default button to go back to whatever that previous like habit or expectation was. And it's like, no, like, no, we're not doing this. We're not always going to be motivated, and just really like flat out telling people that motivation is bullshit, and like it is a state of being, and like sometimes you are going to be motivated, and that's amazing. You can lean into that, but like most of the time you're not going to be motivated. So it's really about just like leaning into your why, like why these pieces are important to you, and like your goals and the shifts that you want to make. And like that's the powerful piece that we want to lean into, not the like feeling of motivation that comes and goes.
Yeah, and I think remembering too, like you don't need the perfect circumstances to get a workout in. Like
Yeah.
even if it means like we've recorded a couple episodes today, so I don't know if Caitlin mentioned it in this episode or another one we recorded. But um like if you're down doing tummy time, with your baby, you're already on the ground. Do some exercises on the ground, like do some glute bridges, maybe work on your 360 breathing, reconnecting to your core, just do a little bit of something. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm in my workout space. I've got my cute fit on. Like my music is going, baby's sleeping and taking a perfect nap. Like, would we love that? Of course, but that's not always going to happen. And if we're always waiting for those perfect circumstances, like, I don't know about you guys, but my second child slept like crap. Her naps were absolutely horrendous for the first year of her life. If I was always waiting for perfect nap time, I would have done nothing. So, just knowing, like, maybe you're even doing a workout with a baby strapped to you if your baby likes to be worn. Like, do a couple squats. Like it doesn't have to be anything crazy. And sometimes that helps with the motivation piece too, because then it's not so like daunting in your brain, where you're like, I need motivation to do this because, oh my gosh, it's like this big thing that I need to do. Instead, it's just like, oh, let me do a couple squats here when I'm baby wearing or some walking lunges, like something quick and easy that's still gonna give me that like dopamine hit of like a quick win and still helping me progress with my goals.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think those are all good and different like points that we've talked about today that hopefully again like help you set like realistic expectations for what exercise might look like, in your first year postpartum. You know, there's no perfect schedule. No perfect schedule.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
both attest to that. To
Right. Like
that.
it's gonna look different for everybody. Everyone's going through postpartum differently, has different babies, like we said. And so, remember that's not a competition. You're doing the best you can. It all counts. It all helps. And I don't ever want you to think that like if you can't do it perfectly, there's no point in doing it all at all, because that's not true. Every little thing that you can do is great. And so just keep showing up, doing what you can. We love it. We celebrate all of it. So that wraps up our episode for today. If you found this helpful, be sure to share with a friend. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and we will be back next week.